Mabato Munzi. We are having a conscious conversation on leadership. I'm calling this the social reconstruct because I believe our country really needs to re-evaluate where we are at right now and what it is we are busy creating. Is there an opportunity to perhaps dismantle certain things so we can rebuild? I am very grateful to Regenesis Business School for affording me this opportunity to have this conversation here. I think it's really, really great for institutions to be supporting young people, young initiatives. And with that, I'd like to welcome the Dean of the school, Dr. Sibongiseni Khumalo, to just welcome us and to give us a few words.
Thank you, Mabato. Good afternoon, everyone, particularly our distinguished guests who are here in the room with us, and everyone watching us online, participating online. My name is Sibongiseni Khumalo. I would like to welcome you to this occasion hosted at Regenesis this afternoon. We hope it's going to really add value in terms of the current discourse, social reconstruction. The question that is asked this afternoon is an interesting one, a very pertinent one, particularly in this day and age when we are facing a whole lot of issues and challenges and disruption. How do we lead differently? How do we lead better? How do we make sure that the outcomes we get out of leadership are the desirable ones? And so we resonate quite closely with the theme for today, and we support this initiative Mabato has put together. We support such initiatives because they contribute to the well-being, they contribute to the well-being of our society, of our country. And as Regenesis, we do exist to make the world a better place through quality education. And this couldn't have come at the right time. You know, such conversations, such dialogues are very relevant. And as I was reflecting on the theme for today and the discussions that are to be had, obviously the panel is very well equipped to deal and delve with the issues at hand and the question particularly asked this afternoon. But as Regenesis, what are we doing and what have we done to respond to this question? What have we displayed as a way of responding to the question? And what came to mind immediately was the graduate attributes. We have several graduate attributes, but one of those graduate attributes is leading consciously. In other words, we want our graduates to display elements of leading consciously. We say to them when they graduate, when they leave Regenesis as graduates, they need to be aware of how they come across. They need to be conscious of how they lead. But among other things, how we define conscious leadership as a way of arriving at desirable outcomes would be that they are aware of what they are doing. They are aware of themselves. They are aware of their futures, and they are really ethical. They conduct and behave themselves ethically. They are aware of their emotional as well as spiritual intelligence, and they put right at the center of their businesses sustainability, because that's part of conversations to be had going forward, and probably as part of this conversation this afternoon. And before I take further time, really I want to appreciate you for joining us this afternoon, and for Mabato and the entire team that's put this together for hosting it. And I wish you well in the discussions this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Before we start, I would like to give thanks to those who came before me, to give thanks to the energies and the spirits that have allowed us to gather here. I would love to give thanks and gratitude to the panel for the work they have done so far. I mean, most of them are at least 10 years my senior. So I'm very grateful to be amongst people who are doing the work I believe is so important for our people, Black people in particular. We have so much work to do in reclaiming who we are, and I am really grateful for the groundwork that has been done, and I feel so much supported. Thank you very much. And I know I've got so much to learn from you. You have shown me your support in so many ways, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm going to do very brief introductions, and you guys will introduce yourselves as you wish. Rosh, I met so many years ago, and we met once, and it was once, right? And it was great. I think I was starting my journey as an entrepreneur, and he had already been doing quite a bit of work in terms of mentoring young people. And I'm so grateful that you are part of this conversation, because entrepreneurship is so key for us, particularly as Black people, for us to reclaim who we are, for us to, to regain our dignity and our pride. I know the challenges of entrepreneurship, and I really salute you for continuing the work, because it's not easy. I've been doing it for a lesser period than you, and I know there are so many obstacles for us. So, Kyalebo, thank you very much. Sonyezo, I'm excited to have you here. We've never met, but I've heard so much about you. I know the work you are doing through the Rivonia Circle and other sort of initiatives, your work as a journalist, you're a published author as well. Rise Mzansi, also an initiative that is so much needed for the times we find ourselves in, where the political parties that have gotten us to this point sort of like, we need to rattle things a little bit. We need new energy, we need new ideas, we need new imaginations, and thank you very much for getting into that political space that is often so hard. And dangerous, as some have experienced. And I speak about our forefathers, the Bikos and the Hainis of this world, that did such amazing work for the liberation of our people, So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're doing your rounds around the country preparing for next year. So I really appreciate your time and your presence. Thank you very much. Auntie B, I met this lady for the first time and we were in tears. We were supposed to have a coffee, right, and relax, and it was our first intro. We ended up for the entire more than 2 hours of our meeting sitting at the hotel lobby, and we were in tears. We were in tears because I believe our ancestors were happy for us to connect. And there was just so much resonance, between us that I think was the beginning of such a great partnership, relationship, a big sister, being a part of my life, someone who understands and has the same, what do I call it? The same burn, the same fire, and that is to change things. And I see you, I see your people, and I am grateful for all the work that you have done, for your authenticity. I mean, it just blows me away how much you have really done. And thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you. And this is Shingai Ngara. We met through his sister, who I really look up to, Gogo Rutendo. I think she's doing amazing work. And we had our coffee session, and we also hit it off, but more on the business, political, sort of like sense to say how do we reconstruct the economy? Where are the bottlenecks? What are the things that are barriers really for us as Black people, not only for this generation, but the future? What is it that we can build or rebuild? How do we rebuild that? How do we redefine questions? It was a very interesting conversation, And I'm glad to say we clicked and we have been in touch since. And I admire the work that you have done, the projects that you are still yet to do, and I wish you all of the best with that. I'm here for support. I think it is so important that we support each other, because for us, there are just so many challenges. People are not exaggerating when they say, for Black people to be successful, you probably need to work 10 times harder than your white counterpart. So these are the realities we find ourselves in. Thank you for making time. I know you are very busy. Baba Maseko. Thank you for being here. Your knowledge, I've never met somebody who's as well read as this man.
Who reads me?
No, like his knowledge. Sometimes I think I found new information or a new author and I send it to him. And it's like, oh, this one, you should read that. I love this one because of this and that. And so that's very inspiring, because I don't think we make a lot of time to read. And, it's not easy for us as Black people to travel because of the economics of traveling. But reading broadens our minds so much. Reading expands our world. And he's given me so many books to read. I'm like, oh my God, when am I going to read all these books? But also his insights around our culture as African people, not only the Nguni people, but just Africa in its entirety is really inspiring. The way you choose to live your life, the things you're committed to, how you spend your time is really inspiring. And I think there are so many young Black men who can learn so much from you. Thank you very much for who you are. Thank you for teaching. And I hope we will get to enjoy more of what you have to offer.
For sure.
Actually, still a present, it's something that we still experience in 2023, where whiteness or white structures are seen to be better. And a lot of the time, Black people aspire for that whiteness. And so without getting too political about my views on certain things, today's question is on leadership. And really, I'm curious to know, in what ways can we lead differently for more desirable outcomes? And when I talk about desirable outcomes, I think we can all attest to the fact that we are not in a good place. As a country, a lot of individuals are suffering from depression. Families are not functioning well. Communities are not functioning well. We see the crisis of drugs, of crime in our communities. We see the economy. I mean, we're only 30 years or so into our democracy, and I cannot say, and maybe someone older might say, Mabato, you're speaking from a place of privilege, but I cannot say I'm excited about the South Africa I need to exist in today. And so my question or the conversation really today is about, what is it that we are not doing? How are we responding? What can we do differently to address some of the social ills we are finding ourselves in? When we dream of a South Africa or in Africa, what are we dreaming of? I don't feel like we've had a national debate about what we want our country to look like. I don't think there is a consensus on what we want our politics to be like, what we want our communities to look like. When we say we are a rainbow nation, or this is South Africa, we are living 30 years post-apartheid, what do we want that to look like? as a young woman, a black young woman, an entrepreneur, there are many challenges I face, and I feel like I should not be facing, but because the system is designed the way it is designed, and there isn't a sense of leadership, at least from my point of view, around how to change things and how to make opportunities more accessible to young black people in order to have a more equitable society, you know, a fair chance at life. I always say black people don't really get a fair chance at life. And so how can we lead differently for more desirable outcomes? Looking at the land issue, I'm in the retail space. It grinds me that I need to pay the people I need to pay rent. And I've been funded by a developmental finance institution that is meant to support black people. The money, your tax is going to the same people who stole the land from us, right? We look at the issue of food. Food is so expensive. Why is food expensive? Why is food expensive when we have so much land? When our people know how to work the land? Why has agriculture and creating self-sustaining communities not been a priority in the leadership of, or by the leadership of this country? So I sometimes sit and I'm like, what kind of people are in these positions? How did they get there? Because it doesn't make sense to me as a 35-year-old. It doesn't, I don't understand how they think. And so I'd like to open up the floor to you, because you have walked this path a little bit longer than I have. Maybe you can help me make sense of what I am struggling to reconcile in my head. Right? Ntate Manabolo, please. And I think if you can please just maybe share a little bit about what you do at the Laura Center. Something I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of you. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you so much, baby. Okay, apparently I am not. It says it's on, yeah.
All right.
So I work with I work for the Laura Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. So what we basically do is we sort of work with entrepreneurs, and the idea is to equip them to start and grow their businesses. And the premise being that if you look at most developed countries, at the forefront is SME development, and those are the people that actually drive the economy. And given, looking at the high unemployment in the country, one of the solutions that we should be looking at is how can we foster the spirit of entrepreneurship in communities in rural areas. You talk about looking at the land, you talk about why is food so expensive, and if you look at, for instance, the food value chain, it's partly open, which then excludes. It's quite a very disturbing thing to look at the food value chain and realize that actually it's not built for poor people. It's actually built for, the good food that you eat is expensive, and the junk food is cheap, and it's cheap because the people can afford it. Are poor people, and therefore they're exposed to junk food, which is not good for them. I can go deep on that, it's a debate by itself, but we work with young entrepreneurs, and the goal is really to sort of help them grow their businesses and employ people. One of the things that we just completed now is we've trained about 3,000 entrepreneurs in the past 6 months. We finished last month in August, throughout the country, and in different parts of the country, rural areas, townships. And there's quite a number of things that are coming up as we go in and talk to. They don't feel supported, they don't feel included in the economy, It's quite an interesting thing to look at how even government, deals with them or supposedly supports them. After some time, you pick up a theme. For government is attendance register. You just need attendance register so that you can submit it and get your fund. His voice is very low. Does he have a mic? What is it? So you kind of get a sense that, we have forgotten. And even politicians have forgotten. It's about how can I make myself and my friends prosperous. And we'll see the masses when it's elections. But other than that, they're on their own. I'll give you a simple example. This morning, as I was coming in, my mom is from America, for instance. And she called me, she says, they haven't been making electricity since yesterday, and it's not working. Then I called some of my friends from there. They said, no, actually, the power station has been blown up. It didn't blow up, it's been blown up. And I'm like, but why would someone do that? So, this is how the locals create jobs for themselves. So they blocked the power station, and with the intention that they'll be given a project to rebuild the power station so that they can create jobs for themselves. So we're now getting to the point where we're sabotaging infrastructure so that we can find a way of creating our own opportunities. So it's those type of things that I'm hoping through this platform we'll be able to discuss it.
Thank you so much. Songezo, please, a brief introduction and just your opening thoughts on this conversation and your role in the political space, and maybe as a citizen, as a black person.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me. Proud South African. I think maybe I'll just say two things. The first, I think, is about having a conversation or facilitating those conversations about what kind of people we want to be and what kind of society we want to be, and therefore what we need to do in order to become that society. If we ask that question in that way, you then don't have necessarily the people we call leaders, as it were, because it becomes a shared responsibility. And my understanding of a leader is somebody who takes responsibility for things that need to be done. In our families, if you solve a problem, they don't say, oh, you're a great leader. They say you've done well. In isiXhosa, they say unenza benzo. You are productive, you produce results. And the thing is about how do we become productive in constructing the society we want to be. But there is another aspect to that, which is about how we understand how we got here. And whether we believe we have separate or shared histories. Because if we don't see our history as a shared history, as violent and as brutal as it is, we are almost always going to seek paths that are separate as we go forward, and not try to have the difficult conversation about, again, the construction of a society and what kind of society do we become, and reconcile ourselves to the difficult and problematic nature of our history, as are all societies in the world, who tell their history with all the problematic characters in that history, and not try and tell a history that is going to be romantic, that is going to tickle our senses, but that history continues to live with us today, and it will continue to live with us tomorrow. You cannot deal with that which you refuse to acknowledge is there, right? And I think I find that's what is missing in the overall leadership conversation in South Africa. And therefore people exist and try to lead or make a difference in their lanes. And so I am not a politician, and therefore I am not going to get involved with that political problem. That make a contribution is to say we need to learn to own all of the problem in the manner in which we do in our own families. Because communities are made of families, and nations are made of communities. It looks to me that we try and divide ourselves or create niches according to the problems we choose to get involved in. It's a kind of person who's probably online, who goes to Regenesis Business School, who wants to know what your policies are. It's not that policies are not important, they're really important. I'm actually obsessive about policy, but it needs to have a premise. You need to know what you're trying to build because it affects the formulation of that policy. And in closing, therefore, we've come to a conclusion that we need to, in our political conversation, do two things: political process. One, the church, business, and so on, you can get involved with that work, but you've centered it on the politics. The second is that we've also gone for themes of political conversation that I believe enable ordinary people to have a profound conversation without being policy specialists. And those are the family, the community, its governance, it is the economy we want that will sustain us, it is nation and community building, and it is climate change and sustaining our environment and our world. I think those 6 things people can relate to without feeling that they need to be experts. And we are committed to doing things in this way for the long term because we think it is a conversation that all of us need to have.
Thank you so much for your introductory contribution. Something you said struck out for me because of some of the other work I do, and you said you cannot fix what you don't acknowledge, and it goes with healing. As a country, we cannot move forward until we are willing to face the violent history and the traumatic experiences we have. And so without truth, without honest conversations, it will be very difficult to rebuild this nation. So thank you for having that in how you do things, because it is important. You acknowledge what the problem is as honestly as you can, so that you can build or rebuild. So yeah, Auntie B, your opening thoughts.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me here today. I am Auntie B, but also I'm here as a mother. And I hold that space for my sons as I sit here, and as I listen to your exasperation, which is so valid. And I acknowledge that I have a role to play. I have a role to play as a mother for other mothers. I have a role to play for my children, for my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren. And I think that responsibility is why I sit here. It's how I've been able to say there is a prototype that needs to be visible. You need to build something, and you need to build something so that it can be multiplied. And if we can multiply and honor our story of seed, which I'm absolutely passionate about, whether you are doing your work as little and as soft as a leaf falling, it's still change. It takes one leaf. And not to feel so overwhelmed by everything that's going wrong. And it's interesting that you start off talking about healing. I've just facilitated this morning a session of mental resilience with women, with mothers, talking about the generations and the 4 and 5 generations that mothers are carrying of pain. I don't even want to think of what the fathers are going through, because we're not having these basic conversations. But we are in boardrooms, we are building institutions wounded. And so woundedness is from the place that we're leading from. And then you speak about leadership, and leadership is about influence. So this woundedness is now influencing. This triggered leadership is now influencing. And I'm grateful for for this time of self-expression. We are in a very special time where we can express ourselves. We come from a lot of repression. And that we have language to articulate. And that we can, at some point, some of us can self-determine. And self-determine that I'm going to contribute this. I understand as someone of mixed descent, where one part of my life has been so amplified that I don't even know my African side. What it means to check out of the system and say, I'm going to explore me for my granddaughter and great-granddaughter. And what that does for me, it pushes me to volunteer to drive from Cape to Cairo, so I can cement myself on this continent for my great-grandchildren. It pushes me for me to know, Guti, I'm a Straydom, but I'm also the great-granddaughter of Mandlov. I'm the granddaughter of Mamkize. I don't sit here just as a Straydom. And so building family means that I have to be fully present. Spiritually, it's spiritual intelligence, that's leadership. It's African intelligence, that's leadership. It's cultural intelligence, besides EQ and IQ. And so we have this conversation where we're checking out. We want to only lead with our heads. You know, there's a professor at the University of Zambia, I think she's the VC. She wrote a book called Leading with Your Head, Your Heart, and Your Hands. And straight away, my whole mind moves to the Zulu pot. I call it the Zulu pot. It could be the African pot. I'm from KwaZulu. So that's my referencing. It's got 3 legs. And so we have a leadership now that's wobbling because 2 legs, sometimes we want this 3 pot to stand on 1 leg. Sometimes our education systems are so weak they can't support this. And then we're overburdened with information that we cannot translate. Nothing is integrated. We have environmental issues, social issues, and governance issues that are being put as a reporting system. No, they are our lived experiences. Our traumas are lodged in the environment. We don't do cleansing. We walk into spaces and we don't do the necessary cleansing. We don't listen. We have the solution before we've even heard. We don't go back. This is Heritage Month. It's a time to go back and remember so that we can build for legacy. We've disconnected legacy from heritage. So I'm grateful to be on this platform. I'm passionate about this work. And I think that we don't have to be loud and on social media to get work done.
Thank you. You mentioned a very important subject, the subject of language. Not having the language, and this is one of the challenges we find ourselves in, having to exist in a system that requires us to express ourselves in a language that is not ours. Everything is done in English. Our languages we don't know how to express ourselves through our languages. And you know, one of the women I dearly love, Mama Tebogo Buntu, you know, we often speak, and she reminds me of our sayings, you know, that explain so much about our existence and our relationship with nature, how our elders used to understand how their world operates and have these idioms, right, to communicate that. But it was also a way of telling a story. We no longer have Bogogo. We can go to Kadi school holidays, right, to go listen to those stories. We don't know how to articulate our experiences in fullness because English doesn't quite capture how we exist as people of this land. So language is a very important thing. Not only language as a dialect, but knowing how to express what you are feeling. You know, we are a people of feeling more than thinking. And so, because again, we find ourselves in this society where we don't talk, we don't have time to feel. We are constantly moving, constantly trying to catch up. Interest rate, what you earned last year is not enough this year. So we don't have space to breathe. You know, and this reminds me of someone I also appreciate very much, who says, justice today puts its knee on our necks. The justice we've had for the past 30 years, we cannot breathe because of the justice we supposedly have right now, right? So a lot of richness out of what you're saying. The language is very, very important. And yeah, I'm still finding, there's a personal project I'm busy with, and I had to pause. And I said, I don't quite have the language to articulate this right now. So I'm going to sit with it as I'm gathering the language, because English doesn't quite fully capture what it is I need to communicate through this particular project.
I would just like to add, I know you need to move on, specifically around language. A few weeks ago, I was speaking in Nairobi at the Wild Screen Film Festival. And I left here with a very clear message through many dreams that language around our animals need to change. There's no wildlife in Africa. Those are our totems. And if we don't take that language back, no one's going to give it back to us. And I left that platform with that message. We can do all the shooting we want, we can do all the storytelling we want, but it will always be an object if it's wildlife. We need to claim back our totems. We need to call forth those are our names. And we need to reimagine. I listened to the word entrepreneurship. It sits foreign on my tongue. How is it going to evolve? I look at the word curriculum vitae. Who speaks isiZulu at home, schools Nyesingis, gets a job in Latin? Something is disconnected. And whose responsibility will it be to create that change? So language for me is a real internal dialogue.
Ndatenga.
I can't do that. Okay, I'm Shingai, teacher Tonga. Oh, sorry, I forgot that I'm. So I'm Shingai, teacher Tonga. Oh, it's on.
Yeah.
Take 3.
We need to hear you for the third time.
Right. Okay. I'm Shingai, teacher Tonga. Shingai means be brave and determined. Teacher Tonga means we shall rule. I'm born of the house of Ngara. That's on my father's side. Clan name, Tembo, the zebra. My mother's side. My maternal side is the rabbit. My mother was half Sutu on her father's side, and Zulu. Yes, that is correct. And Zulu on her mother's side, Mbembesi. I locate myself in the unfolding African journey. Yes. And I love the comment that was made earlier around our shared histories. Is it a separate or a shared history? Because I unequivocally experienced a British education, which I cannot divorce from my construct of self. I unequivocally consume American media, which again, I cannot divorce from the construct of self. And so in the ongoing journey is then the continuous attempt at the reconciliation of Shona, Sotho, Zulu, British, American, as an individual to have agency to contribute to this world as it goes. So when I got to the magical age of 40, you still have a bit of time. Carl Jung had the saying that life truly begins at 40. Up until then, you're just doing research. So,
Amen.
So when I got to the age of 40 and was now asking the questions of what is my contribution to this unfolding story? This is the genesis around which the two entities that I founded, Gondofen Green Innovation and the Benin Academy's establishment, then come. So Gondofen is looking at the practical implementation of the green economy. So there's a lot of very amorphous, airy language that isn't grounded into, so what are we actually saying we're going to do? And so by grounding in two fundamental principles of human dignity and ecological harmony, to the points that you've been raising around our language is one with nature. We are rooted in the dignity of every single person. What we are defining the green economy to be is to be such that we are able to construct a systemic shift in our economic makeup that includes everyone in that economy to be a participant on it. And research and modeling has shown that if we actually do that, you are actually going to achieve globally an increase in global GDP of $10.3 trillion by 2050, if we do that. So it isn't just a feel-good, airy-fairy consideration. It's real business. So that's the one organization. The other organization, Bernice, to the point that was raised earlier. So Bernice is my now deceased mother's name. And she was a teacher and a teacher trainer, and she conceived of the three-legged pot model of schooling, in which the three legs, in the pot is the child, and then the legs are the parent, the person that we currently call the teacher, but we want to really call that person a learning facilitator, and it's a very important distinction between a teacher who just imparts information and a learning facilitator who takes the brilliance of the child and facilitates that it blossoms, right? And the community in which the child finds themselves. And to the point, if any of those legs falls over, then the pot falls over. So what the Benin Academy's pedagogy is then looking to then create is how do we look at the wellness of the child so that we can then allow them to express themselves with the full development of all of their faculties, including and especially their well-being. That has been a conversation that we've brought up here.
Thank you very much. You know, Mudisana, which is Hertz boy, right, learns so much. That person is a veterinarian because they know their animal, they know when it's sick, they know when it's expecting, they know the kind of vegetation it needs to be eating, right? But they also understand the environment, meaning they can spot rain or a storm coming from very far, right? So they also then understand the weather. They understand time without necessarily, they can tell by the position of the sun what time more or less it is. What is that if that is not education? Facts that are outdated, you know, because by the time you finish matric, what you learned in grade 10 would have probably changed, right? So I'm excited about your project. We really need to redefine education. And I have seen exciting models around how African learning, even gamification, morabaraba, that is learning, but it's also a game.
I'm not talking about the human, I'm talking about general. We have all the resources and capability to build a really strong nation. I was telling somebody earlier that I don't even like the word nation. I was telling Baba Mkun that I have issues with the word nation because of someone that I read, Mario Vargas Llosa, some South American author. Yeah, he says, no, nation is the creation of the demagogue. It creates a certain structure, and everybody must be patriotic to this, when we are actually individuals with different needs, different clans, different, So I see all of us here, everything that you've said, my brothers and sisters and elder brothers, is telling me that we really are capable of great things. We can do anything that we put our minds to and we put our hands to. So I am Menzi Kakutu Masego, and I define myself as Menzi Kakutu Masego, but as I'm listening to everyone speak, I am realizing how important, actually it's a thought that's been going on in my head a lot, that my mother, to acknowledge my mother in my name is, but then I realize also that Ngogwesintu, I am of Zulu, Swati, Xhosa heritage. My mother's mother is Xhosa, but my father is born of Swati and Zulu, right? So what's happening is we carry all these heritages, I don't know if the word exists, but yeah, we carry all this, and all of it comes with knowledge that we carry in our bloodline. And who are the people that have inspired me and brought me to this level, right? So I am interested in institution building, like my brothers and sisters are creating institutions, but the kind of institutions, and they all are valid. All the institutions that we are all making are valid. I come from the Institute of Africology, we co-created the Institute of Africology with Mama Ya Shantewa, who took the baton from the elders. She took them from Omolefia Santa and all of that and other elders globally. So I've participated in creation of all these different institutions, including trying to create my own, working on creating my own. But then the whole point for me is community and the meaning that that community imbues those institutions with. So, but the main institutions, and as I close, the main point for the institutions that I'm interested in seeing happening and emerging throughout Africa, because I don't define myself as a South African. I know my brother said I'm a South African and proud, and it's good that it's a good thing. I just define myself as an African, right? And there's reasons for that, related to something that Barbara said about traveling. But so the institutions that I'm interested in building, and the kind of leadership that I'm interested in seeing, is one that creates civilizations that are very long-lasting. This is why I'm interested in the ancient Kushite, ancient Egypt, the Songhai, the empires that Africans have built. So I'm interested in this thing called Sankofa. I'm interested in Black consciousness, not as an ideology, but as an inward-looking process, as the man explained it in his writings and all that. But I'm also interested in ensuring that we balance the contributions of the feminine and the masculine in our work. Balance, like it always was. Sometimes it comes across as if Africans were patriarchal. The woman was always just following the man with the spear, leading. But the more we learn about Africa, the more we realize that Umuntu Wesimame was quite a great contributor to this civilization building, to these institutions, whether it's a family institution, the farming institution, the food making, the building institution, the educational, every institution that you can think of in an African setting. It needed both, not even sexes, because they don't even have a word for sex, sexes and gender. We don't have those kinds of words. So I'm interested in making sure that my writing promotes that. I'm interested in that whatever I do promotes that harmony, so that when we lead, we are leading together. We are moving in concentric circles somehow as we move forward.
That's a very rich introduction, and because we had some technical glitch, we are going to extend our conversation so that we get the richness from our panel. I think there is so much to talk about. Please do engage with us. The hashtag to use on the socials is the social reconstruct, as well as conscious conversations. Please also feel free to ask some questions, whether it is on Facebook, on Zoom, the Q&A is open, on Instagram as well, Ms. Montse M, as well as Conscious Conversations, join the conversation. back to our question after this very deep introduction or foundation to this conversation. The question of the day: in what ways can we lead differently for desirable outcomes or more desirable outcomes? We have spoken about our inheritance as African people, because it is our inheritance. Our wisdom, our knowledge, our way of life, I believe, is what will take us forward as humanity. So it's very important that we look at those ways of being. I almost said of doing, but I also realized that doing, productivity, in how we have come to understand it, is also a very colonial concept. And I'm saying this because a lot of us have been objectified through the process of productivity. We are constantly consuming. It's never enough. And as a result, we can never rest. We can never give attention or pay attention to things that matter because of this productivity, you know. So any one of you, please, in what ways can we lead differently for more desirable outcomes?
I think I'll take this session and then hand over. I have a fascination with row 13. In the drive from Cape to Cairo, I discovered that in Ethiopia, which was really my schooling, they had 13 months on their calendar. And so for the last 3 years, I've been focusing on what happened to the 13th month, what's happened in the South, what's happened to our villages, what's happened to our traditions, why is 13 not there? And then it's amplified when I walk onto a plane and there's no row 13. And I think something here is fundamentally missing, and no one's talking about it.
The archetype.
I am an absolute road tripper. I want to put my foot on every N1 to N18. I can tell you that there's 18, N18, but there's no N13. Something fundamentally is missing. So until we stop to look at what is fundamentally missing, and until I can come to you and say, something's missing, and you can see that there's an urgency in this question, and we can stop to say, who took it away? Why was it taken away? What does it mean for our people? What does it mean for the southern tip of Africa not to have that? And to deeply look at the engineering of where we are and who we are. There's no 13th floor. Something is missing. So we'll be building on foundations with missing things.
Missing links.
So.
Sangezo, minute.
So I think, I shouldn't switch it off ever. So let me maybe just talk about what we've settled on as a way of doing politics in communities right across South Africa, and that is maybe just three things. The first is that I think we have understood democracy to be something that is necessarily foreign to how Africans always have. But it's actually not. It still comes down to the language that we use to describe ways in which we want to enable self-government. And as somebody who comes from a village, I know that a chief is not a dictator. There is governing by consensus. There is the taking of the responsibility to challenge the community to do and get into areas that are going to improve and help the community when the leadership role is done well. But it comes down to the agency and power of the people to get the things that the community needs done. My school was built by the community, not by the government. I see after I went to university, the government then came in and put in a few classrooms, but my school was built by the community. The church in which my grandfather preached was built by the community. The dwellings the buildings in our home and throughout the village were the bricks were made through Ilim by everybody in the village working together. This is what we need to do for our country.
That's all.
This is what we need to do for our society. And it is for this reason that we have decided that the idea that there are those who are necessarily privileged and anointed to tell the rest of us what is good for us, that idea is the fake idea. It is the foreign
idea.
We need to, as much as possible, to cultivate the belief that we are the key to the things that we want in our own lives and in our community. It does not mean the government doesn't play a role, but we understand the government to be the agency we have decided to entrust with doing the things that we want. It is not apart from who we are and what we want. It needs to do what we as a society want. I think that's important. And you would think that it's an abstract conversation. It's not, and people get it immediately. Because you also don't treat them like children. Yeah. Where you say, we're going to do the following things for you, go and sit at home. The message that says, this does not happen if all of us stay at home and decide that somebody else is going to do it. We must choose how badly we want it, and we must make sure that it happens. Now, I had a conversation just before I came here with two journalist friends of mine who said, so how do you deal with the problem that people still want to see a leader? And it occurred to me that, again, I encounter this construction here, right? In Sandton, in Branston, in all of these places where we live. People are in no doubt about what leadership means when you choose to have a certain conversation and to initiate certain processes. They understand that to be leadership. And I think perhaps that is some of what we need to try and do throughout society, because in a way we might begin to deal with a lot of the selfishness that we see, whether it is in companies and so on, because if we see our destinies as being intertwined, I need to think differently about how the people that work in my team, if I'm in a company, are doing. And we go back to what we said again. How is your family doing? Would somebody whose family is under strain be able to function here at work? And is it in our collective interest that that person is okay in the family? The last thing I'm going to talk about is community. And our view is that South African communities are broken. Colonialism and apartheid were essentially about breaking up the black family and the black community. If we cannot understand our political endeavors to be fundamentally about the reconstruction of black family life and black community life, we will never get to the point where we have true non-racialism. Because we cannot have these other things that we want, like economic emancipation and so on, when people have to make a choice between putting food on the table and neglecting their children. And maybe neglect is not the right word, but when a mother or a father has to leave their children in the care of somebody else and not see them for a month or 2 or 3 months, they are having to make up the choice to give up their family so that they can put food on the table. And I think that framing things in that way helps us to think differently about what we do in corporate spaces, what we do with policy, what we do with spatial planning, what we do with many, many things, because we obsess about this reconstruction of society in that way.
I like what you bring in, the family, because I think oftentimes we speak about leadership and we do not think of it within the context of family. And families are where people come from. I'm a part of a WhatsApp group with a lot of elders, you know, and a couple of months ago, I sent them a message and I said, the children, the young people that you see today that are wreaking havoc, that are ill-disciplined, as most older people would say, we are products of what they have created. So we come from them. So what are the questions then that, if you are at least 60 plus, what should you be asking yourself when you see a young boy or what conversations are we having within families when we know that one of our cousins or nieces is into the blesser lifestyle? What do we say as a family? As a mother, when you know that your daughter is unemployed and yet there's grocery that is coming in the house every month, what do you say as a mother? You know, are we okay to be beneficiaries of these things? We turn a blind eye when it suits us, and then tomorrow when we get hijacked by a young boy old enough to be your child, you want to act surprised. You know, or like you don't know what is going on, because that is where leadership starts. And I know African families are something close to your heart, community, Baba Maseko. So in your perspective, how do we do this leadership thing in our families? Firstly, because the people who are leading institutions, corporations, government, they come from families. They were raised by people who were or were not able to tell them when they are behaving in a way that doesn't build, or that will not move us forward, or that is out of integrity.
For me, it just goes back to the source. I come from this spiritual approach of things, of talking about, not just talking about, but creating umsamo. It's a word that sometimes it's becoming misused, but what is it? You know, insiga yekhaya. You know, for me, it's about deconstructing or reconstructing. Okay, maybe let me use easy words. These words are important, or reconstruct and deconstruct and decolonize. They're important, they are keys, right? But if we bring them back, like bring these things back to just simplicity, we need to redefine what an African man is. Like mina njengendoda. I know there's all these hashtag indoda must and all those things, but where do they come from? Is indoda must do what? And the price of lobola. We need to go back to what is the price of lobola, and why is it like that? And why is the cow the thing that is used for this particular ritual? Why is the goat the particular thing used for this particular ritual? And what happens if can you be a traditional, rooted, well-grounded man without spilling any of the blood of these innocent animals, because you do not know exactly the science behind, the spiritual science behind why the cow, why the white goat, why the chicken, and how much of all these traditional things are actually colonial? How much of them are constructs? How much of them have absolutely nothing to do with achieving results or opening the codes, dealing with the spiritual codes, you know, reaching God, if it's a prayer that you are doing, all this other noise that you are making around your prayer, is it necessary, or do you just need to be quiet and think about me as a man? What is required of me, from me, before for my family, right? So what does my family require of me, and how much of those expectations are realistic, and how much of those expectations is my family basically lumping onto my shoulders, expectations that are products of the past, a past that is obsolete, you know? So for me, what is important is the head, the head is a word and another English word, but it goes back to those 3 stones, The head is like my surname. I was telling you about my surname. Maseko or Amaseko is the 3 stones, right, that are put around the fire on the round pot, and then they keep the fire burning. And there's a Zulu expression that says, "Ungapholisa amaseko," which basically means do not procrastinate, right? Do not waste time, spend time, understand the meaning, the currency of time, right? So family, really, I know I'm starting from a father because I am a man and I'm a father. So we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to face the truth about the colonial situation that we are in. And if we are interested, if we have a vision of an Africa that is properly reconstituted, decolonized and Africanized, we need to peel away all these layers that are not us, so that we can discover the authentic us. Otherwise, the family will always be, a family influenced by Americanisms, or a family influenced by Oxfordisms, or Romanticisms, or Anglicanisms, or Lutheranisms, but nothing to do with really who you really are as umuntu. Yeah, so that's what's important for me.
So knowing yourself a person is key for authentic leadership.
Yeah, and how your and how your community was. So the thing is, when you talk about was and talk about history and Sankofa, some people think we are basically romantic about the past, as if the past was perfect. No, we just know that there were, in Africa, we did have harmony of all the spheres and all the aspects of life. There was a semblance of that to a large extent, not totally. We were not perfect. We were never perfect. But we know that because of following certain natural, progressive ways of being, respecting nature, respecting the animal, the totem, respecting the elders, and the elders respecting the youth. Those things were there. We never learned them from someone else. In fact, when the foreign influence came in, we forgot those things. So it's a matter of remembering ourselves, knowing ourselves, and remembering everything that we need is already we already have it. Yeah.
The leadership question, particularly around entrepreneurship, it's difficult to I think it is a challenge to expect people to listen when people don't know where their next meal is coming from, or to think deeply, because we are constantly trying to survive. So how does leadership feature in this, in the concept of entrepreneurship? How can we lead differently to ensure economic participation, to ensure that at least people have got their basic needs covered, right? How can we get there? What are we not doing?
So first of all, one of the questions as we're doing this road, show workshops, is to try and really understand what are the bottlenecks in the process of them starting their businesses. And you find that you have entrepreneurs who run retail stores, for instance, and they've lost that sector to your African, Ethiopian brothers.
Important.
And so we go deep and we say, okay, what are they doing right? What are we not doing right? And then they come and say, what are we not doing? We come together, they put them together, they have this whole work. And then I ask, if we notice what they're doing, why can't we do it? Because we know what the solution is. Why can't we replicate the solution and do it ourselves? And I think that's where we get stuck, because it's not a secret. It's not like how other nationalities or institutions, what they're doing to succeed it's kept a secret. We all know what the solution is. But why is it that that we can't do it? Why is it that we somehow don't manage to replicate that? Or come up with our own defined way of working. And so you ask that question, and you have different answers. And some of them goes by saying no because we don't want to succeed. So if we come together and this one succeed, I feel I failed. So then it comes back to, but how do we then define success? Is success you advancing and others are not advancing? Is that success? Because if that's how we define success, then it means we'll all be putting each other down so that I can get forward. And then it comes to, have we healed from the wounds? Because then the other debate is, no, but hold on. We do work together. If you look at the software industry, for instance, we're able to come together, we're able to put money together, and we're able to put it in safety. And, but then the counter to that is, but then what do we use that money for? And they said, no, but we use it for consumption purposes. If we are able to come back and save money, why can't you come back and build schools? Why can't you come back and fund ourselves instead of looking at big banks? Why can't we do that? And then it comes to say, but if we fund you and you succeed, I don't succeed, then, So I think it comes back to how do we define, it comes to how do we define success. What is success? Is success defined as a collective success, or we define success as individual success? And I think for some time we've been defining success as individual success. I need to succeed, and if you succeed, if all of us succeed, I don't feel like I succeed. And actually we need to be comfortable with the fact that we can all be millionaires or whatever, and we are all happy with it. And that's how we define success. So I think until we go and we sort of define what success looks like for us, we'll always be replicating other models that actually work.
I like that you have brought in the collective, because I have been doing a bit of reading on Black consciousness, and I wonder why post 1990, because apartheid separated us, and it was its mandate to do that, and sure, the people of that time know that. So there was a need then to foster Black consciousness and to continue to educate on the importance of unity, particularly for us as Black people. It has not been done, and I'm wondering why, right? And we can park that. But I think it answers your question to say, as Black people, I don't see your success as mine. And I think, and we can maybe on a different platform speak about BEE as a policy, right, and entrepreneurs. That particular policy, with all its good intention, has created a small group of people who have not seen their ability to benefit from a policy like that as a vehicle for them to help others. It has rather created these fat cats who drape themselves in Gucci and Louis Vuitton and expensive watches. And I don't even know if they go to the township just on a regular. And they have almost separated themselves from the rest of us, right? As a young woman, looking at maybe someone who has got another young woman within close proximity of a particular a black elite in the political space, or who is a entrepreneur, that particular young woman might be using certain ways of maximizing on the proximity of the econ of money, of opportunity, of network, right? And so maybe another young woman from Mamelodi might be looking at this and like, but this lady, this girl, she doesn't work hard. Mara, manala, you know, always to do, face beat on fleek. Who doesn't want that? You know, which young black man does not want to drive whatever at 27? Because we see the people who have got access to certain individuals, you know, they just get it. They don't have to work hard. So of course there will be a they and them, because it is a culture that has been created. And I don't know if we realize that this is a culture that has been created. So hard work does not really pay, you know, because many people work hard. I mean, there are people who leave their homes at 4 to take public transport to come to Senton, to be at work at 8. And their lives don't change. They don't get to retire. Yeah. Please, because you know these things, they're heavy. They're heavy, and it's a bit, yeah. Shinga.
Okay. There was one thing that I liked about COVID. One thing that I liked was the family meeting.
First family meeting.
Perhaps forced. But I feel there's a lost opportunity there to have built on what was probably the president's idea there. Because when we talk of family, what do we mean? Right? In a Eurocentric construct, it is a nuclear consideration of a man, a wife, and children, and that is family. When I was in high school, I was part of Interact, social community thing, the school level of Rotary, and I did my community work in old age homes, right? And I found it quite a bizarre concept that a person can take their mother and put her away in some place to be looked after by some strangers, so that he or her can continue in their nuclear family, divorced from their parent, right? Because in my construct, grandmother is a very powerful idea in which we find and locate ourselves in that family. But it's not only the line. So, for example, my younger brother's son sees me as his big father, not a divorced uncle, but another father. But it's not only that it is in a biological line. Last weekend, I was at one of my oldest friends' wedding. We have no blood in common. But his mother is my mother. His sister is my sister. His son is my son, right? And so the conversation about how do we even define family is a conversation which we need to really put a light under and examine. Because if we are saying this nationhood has all of these separations by race, by social class, by space, crucially, right? That is the continued fragmentation and disintegration of the familial construct. So there's a conversation to be had around how do we remember, and I was going to say reimagine, but he's correct to say it's remember that the community construct is rooted in a familial idea. And how do we think of our very nationhood through a familial lens, right? Now, I want to make this point. How do we look at this paradox? There's a paradox of, on the one hand, we are celebrated as we have the best constitution in the world, right? How then do we have the best constitution on the one hand, and on the other hand, the report came out last week, Gini coefficient, inequality, the highest, 0.63, highest in the world. The top 10% of the country have 80.6% of the wealth, right? The Buffett indicator, so that's a measure of the size of the stock market relative to the country's GDP. Little South Africa is in the top 5 globally of 175%, right? So you have overvalue in the stock market, in the capital markets, relative to the production in the economy. What that is saying to you as an indicator is that the stock market is overvalued. What that is saying to you is that wealth is moving upwards. Right? And then the question becomes, if we really are a nation of the Rainbow Nation, if we really believe in Ubuntu, family, how have we allowed this to happen? And President Obama said something very interesting at the funeral in 2013. He said, there are too many of us who happily embrace Madiba's legacy of racial reconciliation, but then passionately resist even modest reform that would go towards the reduction of chronic poverty and growing inequality. And that's a very powerful challenge for us as a society that should be familial in construct, to be saying we should be embracing and encouraging reform to reduce poverty and inequality in a familial sense.
Sure, that shared purpose, shared responsibility that we've always had as Africans, you know, because I remember growing up, you would not misbehave in the streets when there's an adult, even if they are not your parent, because they had the permission to discipline you. Now we don't have that. So how can we have that shared responsibility towards our communities, towards our children, towards our outcomes as a society? Baba Maseko, your thoughts?
I have this thing of being this, it's a spiritual thing. It's almost what I have thought, the reason I wanted to speak after everyone else today, after all three have spoken, I have something that I want to share that I need to read.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
because I'm also thinking about time. I need to read it because I need to say.
I think I'm going to do this in conclusion.
No, we're going to quickly check if we have any engagement on our socials. He forgot to check them. Okay, no questions so far. For me, what is really important as a takeaway from this conversation, it is really what are the desired outcomes firstly, and how are we supposed to lead to have those desired outcomes?
I think when I started off and I took the space, I took it as a mother. And what I really appreciated of every conversation was the role of motherhood, the honoring of motherhood. Bernice Rist is being honored Gokwas are being honored. Politically, we're rebuilding family. And that is what community is about. The deconstruct just of community, it's a common unity. And sometimes we totally miss the common in the unity. So I am extremely grateful to have the space. And I speak from Gokon Ndlovu to my great-great-grandchildren to say we were here, we walked the earth, we contributed where we could, we are dealing with our healing, we are going real deep to reconstruct, and that there are others who have chosen not to. And that is what humanity is, that you have a choice.
Right?
And so every day I choose for them. And someone can decide not to choose. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Songezo, do you have anything to add in terms of, because I don't want us to leave this conversation feeling depressed, right? So what are we saying? What can move us forward? Is there a glimmer of hope? Can we dream?
Yes, of course. It's not a glimmer of hope. There's a lot of hope. The most important thing is to get started. It is to do. It is to not wait for a guaranteed outcome. It is to rejoice in the doing, in the aspiration, in the connection with other people, in the friendships that we form, in the communities that we form. I will go again to our organizing model. We call it the power of 8. And basically it says find 8 other people who are passionate about the things you are passionate about, and do something small as often as you can to make a difference in the lives of others. That's all. So it's a sacred number. I didn't even know, to be honest. I didn't even know, to be honest with you. We really chose a number that we thought for most people is not daunting. You say 10, you go into the double digits. But 8, everybody says, oh yeah, I can come up with 8. That's not it's easy. But what I want to say to anybody who's watching this conversation is, let us get started. Let us do. Let us not have fear that we will fail, because it is that fear that makes sure that we fail. Let us not fear failure. It is a good thing to fail when you are trying, and you are trying with a good heart, with clean intentions, and trusting the goodwill and contribution of others to make what you're trying to do happen.
Thank you so much for that. Rosh, any parting, inspiring words?
Yeah, just to add on to what was said, it's, there are people there are young Africans who are building amazing institutions, who are collaborating, changing their communities. We need to share those stories. We need to sort of redefine what success is. To the best constitution. This is I think we need to lead the because of what we do. We are successful if the majority of the country is profitable. What I like about the presentation is the fact that every day there are numbers coming up who are affected and all those things. Maybe we need to then also because how many people are we taking out of poverty? And not have this shock treatment once every quarter, where instead say the number of your shock we get back to normal.
That's normal.
So maybe just like saying, are we giving a hand on poverty and unemployment? And those are the numbers that we get to see on a daily basis. And maybe if we see those numbers on a daily basis, then we'll start focus on what really is important. Not the number of millionaires that we're getting, but the number of people that we actually push into the middle class as a society. So yes, there are amazing stories. We just need to share those stories out there and celebrate those stories. want to make mistakes. If you want to bring change, you're going to make mistakes. And we need to forgive ourselves. But we should never let ourselves off the hook from trying. We shouldn't, give us, be comfortable with just sitting and outsourcing duties to politicians. Our answers are not going to come from
Thank you for that. We have a question from Dan Josebo, and he is asking about farming and getting more seeds and ham, your favorite, Auntie B. So he says, my community does hemp and hemp crop farming for our community. How can we get more seeds to reach our goal of 1,100 people assisting in this model? I think we can, he's basically trying to get a sense of how he can get more seeds for community farming.
I think Dan should get my email address,
Okay.
and I can connect him to the community, those with the common unity, to emancipate ourselves through the ownership of our own hemp economy. So I would really like that, and for us to connect.
Okay. I think I may have seen communication from him before. He was very enthusiastic about attending this webinar. Thank you very much. And I will connect you with Auntie B. She has lots of seeds, and she has written about ham. One of the things that raised me. We all have these stories, but we just don't want to talk about them. Shingai, do you want to just give us some hope?
I can try. So this paper that I published, the Bennu paper, titled, so Bennu, just as a case in point, comes out of Kemet, has later been anglicized to Phoenix, the bird that rises from the ashes, is originally Kemetic in Bennu, right?
The Bennu bird.
The Bennu bird, correct, right? So I titled the paper Bennu, Africa Innovating Itself Out of Underdevelopment. It's a long title. And then the subtitle was The Economics of Science and Technology Working for the African Renaissance. Now, the point there was to look at economic history to find how can we find a pathway in national construction that can create growth, what we call pro-poor economic growth. And by pro-poor economic growth, we're saying just having growth. So people like to put a thing around the GDP number. If that GDP number is a high number, because not too far from here, in the capital markets, guys are trading fancy instruments and creating economic growth out of that. That is an inequality enhancing growth, right? So just looking at the GDP number alone is very problematic because it's an incomplete story. But if you are looking at a GDP number again, in which you have invested through the development of manufacturing and technology into higher level goods that you can then be exporting, you are then able to earn from your exporting so that you can develop yourselves. It was fundamentally an anti-aid driven paper, anti-handout driven paper, an internal agency driven paper, right?
Love it.
To say we can leverage all of our collective agency so that we can industrialize and export and then create value, which we can then use in our social reconstruction. And a point that I just want to make very, very quickly is we need to think about a distinction that one makes between social organization, which is what is hard-coded, like constitutions and so forth, and what I would call social infrastructure, which is very implicit values, ideas that we hold, certain myths, certain, you spoke of the aspiration to bling and so forth, right? Even under capitalism, it is not a given that you cannot have a socially minded social infrastructure. And I direct you to 2 TED Talks about Norway specifically. The first is by Nikolai Tangen, who is the CEO of what would be their PIC equivalent, in which he first says, I have the best job in the world because I have the honor of looking after the protection of not only our children, but our children's children, children's children, right? So the outlook that they have as a society in a capitalist world is one in which they're trying to create financial protection and growth as a society. The other TED Talk is a guy called Harold Ear, where he asks the very odd question, where is it easiest to become rich? And he finds that the answer is in Scandinavia. And why is that? Because by having a generous welfare state, education is free all the way up to university, right? So it doesn't matter where you started, how poor you were,
Equal.
you can get all the way up in education, right? By having social protection, then unions are then in a position where they can accept if there needs to be a layoff because of automation, right? Because the social net will then carry people. But both of these ideas work in tandem, right? They are creating value to look after as a society in a capitalist realm, right? As their underlying social construct and their social infrastructure. So we have to get past the social infrastructure of the me, the social infrastructure of on the popping bottles at the weekend, right? The social consciousness of, and they see my bling, right? To the social consciousness of the what can I do as part of a greater social contribution.
But that can only happen if you have a sense of responsibility, right? And it goes back to how we see ourselves, what we believe, we are responsible for. I think it's Baba Masek, your closing remarks.
I'm not sure they're going to be inspiring or anything, but let me just briefly. When I was preparing mentally for this conversation, I told myself that I will only quote women. We have a tendency, especially Pan-Africanism and all black radical tradition things that we do. We quote the great men of Africa, the great Pan-Africanists. We forget that the support that they got from their wives, from their secretaries, from in the context of Shembe, the little girl that used to whisper the songs in his ear. So now he has 4 million followers. That's another story. So I made sure that I went online and I was looking for historians, African historians that are women. But the interesting thing that I found was that I did not find any who wrote in English. I found them who were writing in Arabic and writing in French, right? So I just wanna give you that. And one that I found, her name was Sebin Sylvia. So you will not find her work in English at all. It's not even translated, but there's some YouTube things with a bit of translation. So I'm speaking for the creative economy, the cultural and the creative economy. That is my focus. So my closing words, besides the African history and the women that I wanted to quote, I will not be quoting them. I'm quoting me now, and maybe the woman in me. It's just 3 points. So since I'm speaking to the creative economy, I want to ask the artists that are listening and the creators, whether it is writers, whether it is painters, whether it's people who are involved in creativity in any form, ask them these questions. Okay, arts, literature and poetry and performance as tools or forms of development. It's not a question, it's like we need to look at these things as tools for development because they are. And I think people like Eskem Pashlele did that a lot to actually do that with our people, to show people that when you write, yes, it can be entertaining, but it must have a social development center to it. Development must entail seeing or envisioning a full picture. So basically, We have artists in some parts of the world who give their society a picture, an envisioned future for their own society. We need to recapture that. We need to identify the artists that are doing that for us, not just telling us about Shaka Zulu or some other guy in history or some other dude who was ruling by fear or ruling by whatever. Show us other visions. You know, Ben Okri said the freeing of one vision is the freeing of all. And then lastly, do Southern African artists and creatives have a collective full picture of what development means for them, for themselves, artists, and the society they live in? And the last NB, what does good leadership look like for the creative economy? I'd like to close that part. What does good leadership look like for the creative economy by saying that they have been involved in a lot of these groups, organizations like CIPSA. There was something called CIPSA, Cultural Creative, I forgot the rest of the thing, but it was a federation for artists. The amount of problems that these organizations face are based on the fact that the people that are leading, the hearts are not in the right place, they're in the money, they're in the funding. The premise, the whole thing, they may have a great constitution, we traveled to Bloemfontein, we did all these summits, we did all these things in the communities, but at the end of the day, CIPSA is not doing what it was set up to do. Yet it's supposed to be taking care of a sector that is a R1 trillion making sector, but those trillions do not end up in the black community, and they do not even end up with the artists. They end up with the usual suspects, the recording companies, and the owners of industry, right? So it's important for artists to define their future for themselves so that the creative economy is also pan-African, and it is not just ending with just the redefinition of success, as Ubaba was saying. So artists themselves also have to redefine what success means for the creative industry. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Leadership is a very broad subject. I think many thought leaders have spoken, written about leadership for many years. And so I think that the conversation needs to continue. We need to keep on asking these questions, having the deliberations, so that we are more aware as we exist in the different spaces, in our communities, in our families, in the institutions we lead. You know, some are uncles. How are we showing up? Is there an opportunity for us as individuals to lead at that level? And how do you want that leadership to look like? Because it really starts with us, right? Once we take ownership of our roles and our power, our agency, and we decide that we want to show up differently, then maybe we will also start being a bit more finicky about what we accept. You know, because when your sense of self-worth increases, you know, your standards also go higher. But that's an internal and inward journey. How do we see ourselves determines what we accept from the people in our lives, from ourselves, from the leaders of the country, the people we vote for, the people we have put in power. And so those are my parting words. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your attention with us. There are many of these conversations to come, and thank you. Thank you very much.